here we are on the Pacific side of the Panama Canal at the La Playita anchorage. It's basically at the end of the road at Amador from Panama City. We're facing south. Those are the Taboga and Taboguia Islands over there. This is like a major crossroads between the Atlantic and the Pacific. You see a lot of boats anchored out. I've never seen so many boats working and hanging out in one spot. It's like a major crossroads. So to transit the canal on a small boat like this, from the Atlantic to the Pacific, it's easiest to start at Shelter Bay Marina. That's near Cologne, and that's where I started. You also need 4 line handlers. I found 4 excellent line handlers on other boats in that marina, and you basically hang out at a flats anchorage on an afternoon waiting, once you're all set up, waiting for an advisor to board. Then you transit the first 3 sets of locks into Gotham Lake. Then you spend the night at a mooring in Gotham Lake. The next day, another advisor comes, boards your vessel, and basically advises you through 32 to 35 nautical miles of Gotham Lake, basically making sure you hug the right-hand side of the channel. He communicates with other vessels, and then he makes sure you make your speed. About speed, they make you do 5 knots, or make you promise you can do 5 knots, and they don't let you officially use sails. Our advisor didn't let us put up our sails, and well, basically I lied, telling him that we could do 5 knots, knowing that really without fighting any current, without fighting any wind, we can do more like 3 knots. I warned the 4 line handlers that that was a likely scenario. We'd spend another night in the lake. The worst case scenario of lying to them like I did was, well, we spend another night in the lake. You kind of irritate the canal officials. They have a backup plan, of course, that if you spend another night in the lake, you pay $900 in fees, but you still make it to the Pacific, which is better than the alternative. So powering this vessel is only a 9.9 horsepower. It's an old 1973 single-cylinder Saab Model G from Norway. So, it's an awesome motor, so we started. So from the Atlantic side, we tied up 2 sailboats to this powerful trawler, and a lot of bumpers in the middle, and then basically the trawler motored its way up through the canal with us tied to it, and also the 4 lines to the muleys on the locks were tied to the trawler, front and to back, each side. We just hung on for the ride, left the motor neutral, rudder in the center. So we worked through all 3 locks this way, right behind this big, powerful ship in front of us. And that's the last view of the Atlantic. As the lock doors close and the water rushes in, it's about 12 meters deep, empty, and about 20 plus meters deep, full. It's kind of strong current at the beginning, and then it mellows out. Then we enter Gotham Lake. Off to the right there is the Charges River, Rio Charges, and that is the original river that flowed out as dammed now, before the canal was built. The next day, after the advisor arrived, we motored through the lake, hugging the channel. It's beautiful at the beginning, and then toward the end of its 32, 35 nautical miles across the lake, it turns into a cut toward the Pacific side. And then once we got to the Pacific side, the trawler was gone, and we just tied up to that same sailboat. And then the lines, the 2 back lines, the 2 front lines to the muleys on each side of the lock, they walked us up together. So we went through the 3 locks together with the sailboat and in front. And behind us, a huge ship came up, and you can see his mechanical muleys tied up to him that was used to walk him. So the background you've been hearing is this motor at higher RPMs. Here we are just idling. This great little motor got us through the canal burning less than 8 liters of diesel. It's got a hand crank. You can start it by hand, decompress it with that little lever there, get the momentum going and the heavy flywheel, and then recompress it and it sparks right up. Real easy. This thing also doubles as a 100 liter per hour water maker. This is the tachometer from a model airplane tachometer set to a 2-blade propeller. I put 2 white lines in the flywheel there, so it looks like a 2-blade prop when we just set this thing down in front. So here we are idling at 450 RPMs. For the transit, we did about 12,000 RPMs. So it's the next morning. We wake up on the Atlantic side of Ghanam Lake at the mooring, and just after eating some pancakes, the next advisor arrives. We spark up the motor and start heading to the channel. And I grab the tachometer, get the engine going to 1200 RPMs, which is basically 75% of max, a speed I feel comfortable running for hours or days at a time. And then I turn on the radio, which has a GPS for the AIS receiver, and see that's clocking us going 4.5 to 5 knots. Blew my mind. So basically, the first agent I tried hiring to help me with this canal transit, my Spanish really sucks, he denied. He wouldn't even help me. The second one, he wouldn't help me because I told him I couldn't do 5 knots. The second one said, well, if you can't do your 5 knots, then there's a $900 fee. The scenario I shared with you is what would happen. So that's kind of what we expected. And now seeing that we're making almost 5 knots, basically we're going to make it. You know, it hit me. Like, I started crying. So, like, mountain climbers will say, you don't climb a mountain, the mountain lets you climb it. So that's the way the Pacific has been for me. And it hit me then that I was finally going to make it to the Pacific. It was like it took 10 years. It's taken me 10 years. Maybe there could be easier ways, you know, like shipping it or finding someone else to take the boat. But, you know, what's the fun of that? You know, it's the journey. And so, yeah, it's like I remember, you know, working with a realtor I met at the gym in Denver to find a house. And he found the perfect fixer-upper house. I said I wanted it. Then I thought about it that night and talked to him the next day. I said, dude, forget it. I can't buy a house. I'm supposed to get a sailboat and go back to Australia. So no buy, no house. So then it took, you know, well, it took time to find the boat. It wasn't in the Pacific. It happened to be in the Atlantic. So I moved to the Chesapeake Bay, quit the job, moved there, fixing up the boat, then ended up in South Carolina. Beautiful place, met more awesome people, different parts of Florida. Had the idea of going around through the Beagle Channel, South America, which took me on the North Atlantic tour and a lot of islands there in Europe and Africa. And then, well, it's like 10 years later, finally, I'm making it to the Pacific. And I'm on the wrong side to get to Australia. So I kind of laugh because it's also like, you know, my dad, every time I get someplace, he asks, where are you going to next? So as soon as I got to the Pacific, he says, where are you off to next? And, you know, it's kind of like you remember back in school having a teacher who you thought was maybe only one chapter ahead of you. So you were going over chapter 9, and he or she was just reading chapter 10. So that's how I am. So, you know, heck, going through the Atlantic tour I met hundreds of incredible people that touched me in ways I could name hundreds of people and miss them. And, you know, they helped me learn. They helped me get here. They helped me be who I am now. And now it's like there's the Pacific that spans 1/3 of this planet. There's over 30,000 islands in the Pacific. So if it took me 10 years to get here, how long is it going to take to get to Oz? I don't know. What I do know is that, you know, another thing mountain climbers say, it's the journey. It's not the summit. So you could spend only a few minutes on the summit, but the journey, you could spend years climbing some mountains. And, you know, it's the same way for me. So now, how long is it going to take to get to the Pacific? You know, I'm scared about myself because this could take longer. But either way, I know that I'm going to be smarter tomorrow than I am today. That's what keeps me going. And like we all know, God helps those who help themselves. So keep on trying. Keep trying, and you'll get help in mysterious ways, like I did with the weather and with the awesome line handlers that I met. And it's going to keep going. So along the journey, I'll do my best to share with you. And in the meantime, keep on enjoying yours.